So we were doing a top 30. We're going into the breakdown of our list, and we realized we had to split this in two. So part one for you Patreon or YouTube super fan subscriber, it's over there on our on link. So whatever link you are comfortable with, it should be on there. And this is part two. We go down the final 15 as we go into a little bit of the secret behind us or making of the sauce, if you will, of the our top 30. And we start at number 15 with Brett Hurdler. And we mentioned him a little earlier in part one, where we talk about Jack Olafian and some of the similarities here. But Chris, you did a really good job on the update sheet, talking about some of the things that a little more surface deep stat wise.
Yeah, so I mean, Herder is a lefty. The stuff isn't overwhelming. It's a sinker in the low 90s. I think might get up to 94 occasionally. The slider's probably his best pitch. It might flash above average. He's got a decent changeup. He really, when he's on, he's doing a really good job working the edges. And one of the wild things is until yesterday's start, Sunday's start, he hadn't walked a left-handed batter all year. He actually walked two yesterday.
Crazy
Um,
stat, crazy stat.
uh, so he throws a lot of strikes. He doesn't get a ton of swings and misses. A lot of called strikes, which is you worry a little bit about that going forward. But so yeah, what happened with the first couple of months of the year, he looked like he was destined for Toledo. He was just tearing it up. He was ERA under three, 30% strikeout rate, walk rate under 6%. And then in the last 2 months, it looks like a disaster. It's a 5.89 ERA. But when you drill down to the stats, the strikeout rate is down 3%. The walk rate's the same. The FIP is actually lower. It went from 296 in his first 10 starts to 284 in his last 10. The difference is ERA went from 231 to 589. His BABIP went from 284 to 403. Balls are just landing everywhere. Left on base percentage dropped from 84%, which is a little high, to 57%, which is ridiculously low. So there's been a lot of bad luck there. It's not all bad luck though, right? I think there's certainly an element to it of him not being nearly as crisp or as sharp. So those balls that would have been, weak grounders are now slightly harder grounders. And so there's been some struggles there. I don't think they're nearly as bad as they look. But and so that's why we kind of kept. I think he moved up in our list, but part of that was just because of other guys falling. I don't think there's any huge difference in his ceiling or his floor. He looks to me like it's the ceiling of a number five starter, and it's a floor of a long reliever. It's kind of similar to Gibson Long and O'Loughlin. It's just he's I don't know, he's performed a little more consistently than those guys outside of the ERA. Everything else is more consistent. So that's why he's here.
Yeah, and he's done a very good job of kind of in terms of at one point being Erie's most consistent starter. We've seen the struggles of Madden being hit and miss. And early on, Wilmer Flores, Wilmer Flores, to be fair, probably was on the right-handed, in terms of right-handed pitching wise, was too. Even when he had to bulldog some of his starts, where he just had to fight through it, and then the increase in velocity, and then the poor unfortunate hamstring injury is just it's a damper to that. Number 14 is Isaac Pacheco, and Chris, we there was a lot of hope that he would end up in Erie at this point right now, but he's taken a step back a little bit.
Yeah. I think we had him seventh on our last list. He's down to 14th. We dropped the hit tool from 50 to 40. Dropped the power from 60 to 55. The raw power is still great. He's not getting to it as much. He's got a fair amount of doubles. I think he's got 9 home runs, but he's struggling to bat 200. The strikeout rate's above 30%. His timing looks off, and his swing looks kind of grooved, if you will. Like it seems like he can't hit the ball unless it's over the heart of the plate, and that's a concern. We, we saw him at his best at times last year and early this year, and it's been a long struggle for him. But as we talked about with Santana, and we talked about with other guys, sometimes guys just need to stick with it, and something finally clicks. So you're hoping maybe over these final 6 weeks or so he could figure something out. If not, he'll be a year older and have a off season of work and probably return to West Michigan next year, and maybe he can make some advancements then. But it's been a little bit disappointing for him this year.
And there's a premium defensively, though. He has not struggled at all. He's been probably one of the more steady defenders on the left side for the Tigers across all their systems this year.
Yeah, I mean, I would have no problem projecting him as at least an average big league defender at third base, if not above average. He's got surprising athleticism for his size, good first step, strong arm. Some minor things, occasionally an errant throw or whatever, but he's got all the tools to be a really good third baseman, and so much so that he's continued to play a little bit of shortstop more than we thought he would. It's not, I think, a realistic possibility at higher levels, but they're using him there because they can, and that's a good indication of how good he is at third base, I think.
Yeah, and remember at one point early on, we thought maybe he might end up in the outfield or first base
Or
based
first
off
base
his,
even.
yeah, based off his size. But you're right, his athleticism is pretty impressive. It's something that I remember him telling us about him learning to play golf, and so that's kind of a cool thing to see because you have to use your body a little bit. It's not all just size with that. So number 13, and makes his first appearance on any prospect list, especially ours. That would be Justice Bigby. He is the quote. I hate to say this, but he's the new Kerry Carpenter of 2023 in a sense. He's coming out of nowhere, and also because he also, like Kerry Carpenter, was a 19th round draft pick. The question that comes up every single week on the podcast or on Twitter is he legit or not? And there's some people talk about bat pip luck, quote unquote, but there's a lot of things here you got to like about him in terms of opposite field presence and handling his position. Just he does a decent job. He does a good job handling his position, but overall his approach to the plate, I know there's a lot to like about Justice Bigby.
Yeah, I think he did. I saw that Baseball America was able to fit him into their top 30, but we're certainly the most aggressive of anybody who's ranked him, and that's based. It's
Off the
a lot of it.
Frickers building.
A lot of it is what we've seen, but we've also talked to people too, and there's a belief in this guy's ability to hit, and that's the name of the game, right? It's we talked about it before. He's hitting 350 plus, I think, in Erie, and it's over a pretty decent sample size. It's not all luck. He's hitting the ball consistently hard, consistently to the opposite field. You'd love to see him pull the ball a little bit more to get the power production up, but even if he doesn't, the approach is good enough, and the hands are good enough, and the batting eye seems good enough that he's gonna hit his way to the big leagues. I think we're pretty confident in that. You never know. Maybe things will come to a grinding halt in AAA for whatever reason, but yeah, he's a strong kid with a good approach, and as you said, the defense is fine. He's a corner outfielder only right now. He's played some first base in pro ball, but he's a pretty good athlete. So he played catcher in high school. He played just about every other position: second base, third base. He was a quarterback in high school. He's a good athlete. He's just not fast. He's like a 30 runner. He just doesn't seem to have that second gear, and that makes it hard to play up the middle positions, which is going to limit the utility. But and I, to be honest, I haven't really seen him play first base much. I don't know how his hands are. I assume he's pretty much just a corner outfielder. But maybe down the road they might fold in first base again, and maybe even third base again if there's at least some feel for it. Like Tyler Nevin style. And then you've got yourself a four corners utility guy with the ability to hit, which, yeah, I mean, I think at the bare minimum, I think he's going to be a guy who can hit against lefties, and maybe if things work out and he continues to progress, there's a average big league regular there.
And there's one thing that we've learned about how Scott Harris wants. He wants guys that can play multiple positions. He wants position versatility. So this kind of fits into the narrative. And this, I know this wasn't a Harris pick, but still, it fits kind of what they're trying to do right now across the board in the system. So number 12. Oh, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. I was just going to agree with you. But,
okay.
yeah.
Number 12 is Ty Madden. Again, we've seen him quite a bit, and we talked about a little bit earlier, the level of kind of sometimes frustration, especially trying to bury lefties. Lefties hit him at a hard clip because it's a lot of stuff that he throws kind of hangs over there. But when his curveball's on, he's got a really good curveball, but it just really depends on the day, really. I mean, he has a good work ethic. He's been busting his ass. I don't know, Chris. This is where he also has some reliever risk. We were talking about this last night on the podcast.
Yeah, it's he was a high draft pick. He showed flashes last year. He was a little bit iffy, and then he got to Double-A, and it seemed like he switch flipped, and he was getting more strikeouts, more swings and misses. A couple starts ago, he had his best outing ever in terms of swings and misses against was Binghamton, I think. But then he'll go from that. He'll go from looking like a strikeout pitcher who can throw his fastball by guys and get swings and misses on the slider to a guy who just can't seem to locate to save his life and gives up hard contact on all his pitches. And it's particularly damning against left-handed hitters. I think you alluded to that. His OPS against lefties this year is 917. Against righties, it's 573. So he's got this huge platoon issue, and we can't quite figure out why. Because he's got a changeup. It's not great, but he has it. He uses it. It's what do we put a 45 on it? Yeah, like it's a usable pitch. He's got a cutter that he's been throwing a lot more than like 90, 92 that you would think would help with the lefties, but for whatever reason, he can't get them out as consistently. So I think it's a fastball issue. I think they see it out of his hands. I think they see the breaking balls out of his hands. So they're going to have to conquer that, I think, for him to continue moving on as a starter. What they can do for that, I'm not really sure, because as we said, the pitches to combat lefties are there. They're just not terribly effective. So yeah, I've gone from, we were hoping he might be a number 4 starter, and I suppose that ceiling is still there given his he'll throw close to 100. He's got a really good arm and he's got the arsenal, but it feels more now like maybe kind of an Alex Faedo, Kyle Funkhauser type, where he's maybe working middle relief to long, like kind of up and down emergency starter type 5th, 6th starter. So yeah, it's been an up and down year for him.
Yeah, you wanted to, hopefully you could see that some consistency as Erie gets closer to the playoffs and ready for the playoffs. Number 11 is Roberto Campos, and we had him originally, I believe, as high as 7. I want to say it was the top 10 before, wasn't he?
5. We had him 5th.
5.
And that was a May update, right? And that was after he was really good the first couple months of the season, at least the first 6 weeks. We're like, wow, look at this kid's hitting for power. He's hitting for home runs. He's playing a passable outfield, and he's hitting better than we thought. And then basically a lot of that went away. He's still hitting, I think, better than we thought, or at least better than I thought. I thought he would have kind of the classic swing and miss contact issues, and that hasn't been his case. His problem has been making good contact, hitting the ball, swinging at pitches that he can drive rather than swinging at everything that he can get to. And the defense that's when we lean on people who you watch him every day, because we can find the hitting highlights easily enough. Finding the defensive highlights and the defensive miscues is a lot harder.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't get notified about those, and so you lean on people who are there a lot, and they say, yeah, it's rough. It's a real rough look on defense. We've seen enough now to say, okay, I see it. It's weird, bad routes to the ball. It's confusing decisions in the outfield. It's not hitting the cutoff man properly, not throwing accurately. Just a lot of stuff that you would expect from a player who's pretty raw. He's still only 20, doesn't have a ton of professional baseball experience at all. So, yeah, there's still the promise there of an everyday regular right fielder. He's got the raw power for it. He's got the build for it. He's got all the tools. He just needs to refine them a lot more.
Yeah, that's all it is to it. I mean, we did see a couple plays in the outfield live where it was just like he took some really, let's just say, interesting routes to the ball, to say the least. So, at number 10, Kyler Montero, who I got a chance to interview, great character guy, has worked his ass off, learned a new grip on his change. It's still a work in progress, but it has allowed him to set up his fastball and has a very good slider and a curve better. And so this is a guy who we've been told that you could see maybe potentially down the line in a major league uniform. And this is, I mentioned this on the podcast, is another international free agent signee from 2016. So Winsfield Perez, Montero, and Olafian are all part of that class. And so that bodes well. If hopefully they make it to the majors, that's where the end goal is. So if all 3 made it, then that'd be probably the best international draft class Tigers have ever had.
Yeah, for sure. And he's a guy that was not in our top 25, the initial list at the end of last year, begin this year, right? And then we updated it in May, and I think we moved him way up. He may have been 15th or something like that.
Yeah.
From out of the list, and now he's up to 10 because he has been, apart from a couple blow-ups early in Erie, he has been really consistent and really consistently good dominant at times. There's still the occasional issue with command where he'll leave a pitch over the heart of the plate and it gets hit hard. But his stuff, we've talked about his stuff is second only to Jackson Job's in the system. It's the fastball. You're not going to see a fastball below 93. You might see a 92, and you might see it up to 98. It's going to sit in that 93 to 96 range. It's got decent life to it. It's not the sort of thing you can just throw down the middle and get swings and misses on. But if he's throwing at the higher end of the velocity and he's elevating, guys aren't going to hit it. At least certainly not AA hitters. And as you mentioned, he's got the slider is a really high spin pitch for him. It's like 2,800 RPM, and it's in the low to mid 80s, I think. And then he'll back it up with a curveball that is even higher spin pitch. It's 3,100, 3,200 sometimes, and in the upper 70s. And they both have kind of the same shape to them. They're both kind of slurvy, and I think they really work well together because if you think you've picked up on the slider shape, he'll throw you the curveball, and it breaks just as much, and it's moving in the same direction. It's just slower. And then he's got the changeup, like you said. He's updated his grip on that to try to give him another weapon. So he's got all the pitches. He throws enough strikes. Just it's a matter of getting the command a little bit stronger. He's a guy that I do think has number 4 starter. You dream on it, even number 3 starter upside down the road, but also a guy who could theoretically be a closer. He's got that level of stuff. If you wanted him to just pitch in the back end of the bullpen, he's probably sitting 97 to 99 and dumping in 2+ breaking balls, and has a changeup in his back pocket. So there's a lot of promise there, and you got to interview him. He seems like a good dude. One of the more exciting prospects in the system.
Yeah, it's good when you can get actual talking to the player versus just getting a coach's opinion or some scout told you that they, to look out for him, if you will. So number 9 is the newest Tiger in the system who came over in the Michael Lorenz trade, Hao-Yu Lee, who comes in pretty highly regarded. He had a extra base hit, a triple, I believe, over the weekend against Lake County. And one of the things about this report that stood out to me, just watching him at the plate, he has kind of like an uppercut swing to him. Very good upper body strength, kind of like a thick dude, just kind of gets in there. And that's where you can see the potential that he could probably have some more power. Again, he's only 20 years old too. So that's something to consider, that he is doing very well for this level. And the defense, a lot of it from what I was reading, but then when I ended up looking up, as a lot of it is a hit first profile, and he ended up working with, and this is a story I saw, that he worked with former Tigers, now Philadelphia's infield instructor, Adam Everett. By the way, Dombrowski, he was probably like, "Hey man, look, I signed you. I like you. You come work with me." Anyway, sorry, it's abstract, but no. His defense has improved. He's trying to work on his footwork, trying to get better with his glove. He has good hands. He makes good decisions. It's just sometimes he was just a little sloppy with his footwork, and overall, again, just limited sample size. I can see why the Tigers were after him. Scott Harris had been targeting him for a while, for quite some time. And another example of this could be possibly a deep scouting coup by the Tigers here.
Yeah, it's a really nice. He's a nice player. You kind of get images of like a classic spark plug, almost the classic number 2 hitter, second baseman. That was just kind of the platonic ideal of a baseball player, right? It's probably not going to be anything plus anywhere, but everything's going to be close to average, and he's going to be, just an energetic guy who goes out there and performs, and you hope that maybe could be a team leader too down the line. So it's a nice addition. We've only seen him a little bit, but yeah, I like what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and I think again, another part of Harris's target, our players are kind of red ass and have like some flair to them, and so you could definitely see that here with that. So let's move on to number 8, and a familiar face, and Chase Young, and he's up at AA right now, which is what you saw with Lee being in West Michigan now. So there's been some improvements here. We talked about, I know you're kind of been, quote, the low man on him, if you will. the I'm a little more optimistic about him. The power's there. His defense has been better than anticipated. It's just the consistency on the hitting side of things where you want to see a higher hit for average, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what yeah, I consider him to have a lower hit tool than what we have, but it's um, he's gone out and shown me a little bit, right? Like I was worried coming into the year that the game power wasn't there. And that was supposed to be one of his calling cards. He was a 60 hit, 60 power guy, right? That was why he was one of the most sought after draft picks in last year's draft. And we just didn't see. We saw, I think, one home run from him in his pro debut last year, and it just felt like a lot of weak contact to left field. Not necessarily weak contact, but fly balls that were dying 20, 30 feet from the wall in left field. And he is pulling the ball significantly more this year, like 8 to 10% more, and he's lofting it in the air and hitting big time home runs. I think we saw his first couple home runs in Erie, or at least one of them, and it was to like center field. Maybe he had two home runs, but it was yeah, the power seems to be legit. And you're right. The only concern for me now is just a little bit more consistency in terms of contact. There's a lot of strikeouts. He's got a really good batting eye. He works long at bats. He'll take his walks, but the strikeouts are 35, 36% in double A right now. He's got to get those down a little bit. To be fair, he just got to double A, right? He's been there for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So it's not a shock that he's adjusting to the level. But yeah, I don't project him to ever really hit more than like 240, 250 in the big leagues if when he gets there, because it's just the way his swing works. But he's going to supplement that with some power and some on base, and so I think it'll be a solid average regular. And the key, and we mentioned it, is that despite him being pretty slow, and that's sometimes that's just the way we are, right? We're born that way. We don't necessarily run as fast as we'd like to, but he's a very competent defender, like very fundamentally sound, gets to just about everything he can, and when he gets to it, he makes the play, and that's all you can really ask for, right? I think I even saw a quote that Gabe Alvarez thinks he could theoretically play third base, which maybe we'll see. They haven't had him play a single game for third base yet in the minors, but if they start doing that, then that would be interesting to see.
That would be interesting to see because
I think the arm's a little light for that, but we'll
yeah, that
see.
was just gonna
I mean,
say, yeah, maybe even the time it's short, but now never mind because range wise, he would be kind of limited on that.
yeah,
So number 7, and we've talked about him quite a bit throughout the list, is Wilmer Flores. We moved down a little bit because of his struggles this year a little bit, but the command, I give a lot of props. This was a lot of growth for Flores because he was forced and he was throwing that change up, so he's throwing the change up a little bit more, and he wasn't doing too bad, but also wasn't it was okay, and he's trying to incorporate that, but the injury kind of set him back. And when I first saw that he was going to IL, I kind of cringed, and because of increase in velocity, sometimes if we indicated see Will Kill Hernandez, remember he was throwing really hard, all of a sudden, boom, out with
mhm,
TJ. So
yeah,
I was concerned about that at first.
yeah, and so you're glad it's not an arm thing, but it's still a bummer that he's on the IL and possibly out for the year. But uh, yeah, I mean, with him, it's been a strange year because he was one of the more electric prospects in the system last year. Especially, he just bullied his way right out of high A. He was striking out guys with just electric fastballs and nasty breaking balls. Got to double A and held his own for the most of the season, to the point where we thought for sure he was going to begin the year in Triple A, because it seemed like he'd more than proven his own in Double A. He returned to Double A this year, and the stuff just has not been there. And it's not really the stuff so much as just the velocity. His fastball never really got back to that level where it was sitting. I think it was like 93, 95 last year, and he would touch 97, maybe 98 on a good night. And this year it's like 91, 93. And he folded in a changeup. We've seen it. It exists. It's not a particularly great pitch for him, but one of the things they were working on was having him throw more changeups, and he has. The breaking balls are still pretty solid. It's just the diminished velocity makes it harder to project a higher ceiling for him, because it's still like a good shape. He probably has one of the better fastball shapes and spin rates in the system. That combination, and that's been able to get him through. I think in Double A a lot. He could still miss bats in the zone with his fastball, even if it's 92. But I don't know if that's going to work in Triple A or the big leagues. That we'd seen, as you said, we saw a little spike in velocity, which was nice to know, but then he's injured. So, uh, yeah, it's tough. I still think that there's, he's another guy like Montero. There's number 4 starter potential there if he gets the velocity back, and if not, I think he would be a pretty solid bullpen option. So
Yeah, depending on how Detroit wants to use him. But yeah, he's building. He wanted to build off and being in terms of stamina to be a better to stick around as a starter.
yeah,
Number 6, Kevin
McGarnagle. McGonigal, yes, Kevin
McGonigal.
McGonigal. They're
Off to a good start in complex league.
Yeah, and it's obviously it's very short, small sample sizes, but he's 3 for 7 or whatever with a double and a walk and a steal, and that's one of those things where like he's a guy that's, it's tough. Like you said, we haven't seen these guys in pro ball, so you never really know what you're getting. But I felt some comfort with McGonigal because of how present he was on the showcase circuit, and how he was at every perfect game event and how well he performed, and the people who really follow those things loved his hit tool. So I was like, all right, I feel like a guy like that is probably gonna be able to hold his own at least in the low minors, and so far so good. Obviously, again, it's very very limited experience, but yeah, we think it's a hit first profile. There's probably a little bit of juice in the bat, hopefully average power. And our friend Jeff Ponce from Baseball America actually was down and got video of him and got McGonigal's first hit, which was a ground ball to second base, but he beat it out. And I timed the video, and it was 4.15 to first base, which is a 55 grade run time. So maybe a little bit more speed in there too, or maybe it's just pure hustle. He compares himself to Chase Utley. If he becomes half a Chase Utley, I think Tigers fans will be very happy.
Yeah, right now at this point, I as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, I understand. I get it now. He doesn't look like a kid out of high school a little bit. I mean, it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. You can see his size, and you can see that developing further. Number 5, Justin Henry Malloy, and this should come at no surprise. We are seeing him more in the outfield because of Cole Keith going to third, and the glove. Again, maybe it was a bad day when I saw him throw from the outfield, but against Akron, or I'm sorry, Columbus, the arm is kind of a. I'm surprised we stuck with the 50 on there on the arm, but
I don't think we did. Let's
no.
see what. Let's see. All right. Oh, arm down 5 to 50. Yeah. So it went from a 55 to a 50. So
Okay, all right, that makes more sense then. Okay, but yeah, I mean, this is a guy who can hold his own in the outfield, plays decent, and he is in the ball better as of late. But when teams start figuring out his strikeout, this guy didn't strike out a lot, but then teams start figuring out, okay, you know what, we're gonna go low and away, we're gonna jam him inside, and it's taking him a minute to adjust to that.
yeah, he had a couple. He was awesome in April. I'm looking now at the stats. April, he had a 997 OPS. But then, yeah, the came crashing down in May. We, like you said, felt like teams recognized his weaknesses, which would appear to be breaking balls in the zone, breaking balls in near his hands, and then fastballs away or breaking balls away. Like they were really working them east west. And so yeah, the OPS dropped to, was it? I'm looking now, 716 in May and 826 in June. But one thing we didn't really point out, it was back up over 1,000 for July. Now it was only 15 games in July because of the break, but he hit 346, 471, 546 in July, 3 home runs, 13 walks, 17 strikeouts. So he seems to have adjusted back. I think the weakness, he's probably always going to have some issues with breaking balls in the zone and things on his hands, but he's adjusted and he's performing, and he started August off just as well. So it's good to see, and I think it's still a potential average, above average hitter overall. He's matched his home run total from last year with 17. He still walks a ton. He's hitting the ball hard, so that's all good. The bummer is that he's not playing third base in part because Cole Keith is there. Cole Keith is there, but also in part because he just was not very good. He couldn't get the job done. Unfortunately, it's the hands were okay, but he was really bad at throwing off platform and would make weird decisions, and it didn't work there. So he's working left field, right field now, probably left fielder long term, but they're getting him time in both corners just to get a feel for it. And I think he'll be okay out there. I don't know if it's going to be, again, I don't know if it's like Kerry Carpenter level, if it's Kristen Stewart level, but it's not going to be a plus defender by any means, but he might be able to get to fringe average.
Yeah, and you're hoping that that's the case. You hope that he can continue to grow even showing that kind of like getting consistent power too. And that's where sometimes you see him and he hits a home run that's like a moonshot, and then sometimes it's yeah. For me, I just like to see the more power consistency with his bat, and so hopefully that comes
Yeah,
about.
I just want, and the one other thing we talked about early in the season, there were questions. You can go back to our old Ask Me Anything chat there on Reddit. People, there was concern about his reverse splits. He wasn't hitting lefties as well as he was hitting righties. And if you look at his OPS now against righties, it's 891, and against lefties, 879. So not a real concern, I don't think. It was just kind of a small sample size thing and something he adjusted to.
Yeah. And
Good.
again, he's a smart guy. Like I said, he was on our interview series from earlier in the year, and it was good to talk to him and get a basis on what kind of person he is, and also as a hitter, with the patience. And so that again, the Tigers hopefully will see the fruits of the labor from that trade. Number 4, the final 4, if you will, Parker Meadows. We were just debating in our Discord channel. If you want to join our Discord, we will just ask us and we'll send you the link. And actually, we'll put the link in the description. And so this is a highly contested. I like Chris. I know you made me perhaps pump the brakes on Parker Meadows. I
Well,
think. Well, I was to say. Well, I know we were talking about this in Discord just now. At this point, I think giving Parker Meadows an opportunity just to see what he's possibly about. But I know there's a roadblock there. But I think he's done enough to at least get maybe or deserve a call up. Whether he deserves a regular spot in the team, who knows? But I don't know. I just think there's a lot there defensively too that I like.
yeah, absolutely. And when I'm saying pump the brakes, it's not necessarily like, hey, I'm saying pump the brakes. Like I think he's earned a shot at the big leagues. I think he deserves it. I think he's a good enough all around player that he's not going to harm the team in any real way, right? I'm just saying pump the brakes in terms of, I don't know, projecting him to be more than, to come up and like tear things up, I guess is what I'm saying, because he's still hitting 260 in AAA. And one of the things that we try to remind people, right, like what big leaguers look like when they're in AAA, and just think back to that week that Riley Green had. Remember when we went 5 for 5 or 6 for 6 or whatever, and was just scorching every single ball because
Yeah,
he's a good big leaguer. That's what big leaguers do in AAA. They don't hit 260. Now, that's not to say that Parker Meadows can't get to that level, right? Riley Green didn't get to AAA and hit, you know, scorching line drives in every at bat. He had to get that to that level, and he is there now. I'm just saying, I don't know if Parker Meadows is entirely ready yet, but I think he's earned the shot just by his performance, right? He's since June 1st, he's hitting like 280 with a 10% walk rate and like a 250 ISO. He's hitting for tons of power, not tons of power, but well above average power. He's got he's got bat speed, he's got power, he's got speed. He's a good defender in center field. He could play the corners. I think he's more comfortable in center than the corners, but yeah, everything's there that like I said, he's not going to harm the team if they bring him up. I just don't know. Like, I don't know if that's what Scott Harris wants from his call ups. The guys to be 110% ready, hitting 330 in AAA, so they hit 280 in the big leagues or whatever. But um, I still think he's a very good prospect. At the very least, I think he's going to give you above average center field defense and a little bit of power and a little bit of speed. Now, the ultimate question will be, how well does he hit? Is he hitting 220? Is he hitting 260? Is he hitting 180? Like I think I'm pretty comfortable saying he's going to be somewhere between 220 and 260, but you never know until they come up and do it, and that's going to ultimately, I think, determine how much he plays. We talked about it before. He struggled against lefties. This year, he's hitting lefties just fine, almost as well as he's hitting righties, if not better. So um, that's good to see too. So there's a lot of progress there, a lot to like, and he is one of the Tigers' top 5 prospects for sure, in our opinion. I have no
yeah,
problem with it. I think we had him number 2 before, and he dropped down through no fault of his own. It's because they drafted Max Clark and because Jackson Jobe came back healthy. Not to spoil the top of the list.
yeah, yeah. No spoilers or anything, and that goes to number 3, and Jackson Jobe. And it's funny until so I was skeptical based off the injury. I was skeptical kind of to see where he was when I was down when I was spring training. I see walk in and out, and I was just kind of like, I didn't made no judgments or anything. I was just like, well, if he's out with the back injury. I don't know. It didn't bode well. Then I saw that, and then I saw the start in West Michigan, and then I was like, all right, you know what? I'm sold. The swing and miss is very, very good. He looks a lot better than he did last year, And even when he did hang out those pitches, like somebody was talking about, well, his ERA is 7.55. Well, so what? Don't
Yeah.
look at that. He struck out a career high 9, and he made guys swing and miss. And that's all about if you can miss bats with your fastball at a minor league level, not only in a higher than double A or high A or double A or the higher levels you go with your fastball, that translates well to the major leagues.
Yeah, you know who Jackson Job is right now. He's that new superhero in a movie who's just learning how to use his powers. He has no idea how powerful he is yet. Um, and he's just scratching the surface, we think. So we saw his first 2 starts in West Michigan. Uh, really powerful fastball. You know, I don't know if he threw any under 95, 95, 96, 97 consistently. Slider, dastardly slider, mid 80s. Really tons of horizontal break, huge spin, folded in a really nice changeup. I think people don't give him enough credit. You see comments saying, "Oh, he just needs a third pitch now." He's got it. His changeup is at least average, if not above average. We put an above average grade on it. It's a really good pitch. People don't. I don't give it enough credit. And then he added a cutter this year. And depending on who you talk to, he will say it's a cutter, or he will just say it's a different version of his slider. But that's another pitch, 2,800 RPM, 90 to 93 miles an hour. Really, I in the second start, I saw him backdoor a lefty with the cutter, which you don't. Normally, that's a pitch that you throw in on a guy's hands to get a broken bat or weak contact. But he was using it to steal a strike, which shows kind of advanced command too of that pitch. So yeah, there's a lot to like there. The fastball is still a little bit true. If he leaves it over the heart of the zone, guys can hit it. Professional hitters are very good, but I think he'll have the command down the line to locate that better. He's throwing a ton of strikes right now. I think last we checked was 38 strikeouts and 3 walks in 29 innings or something like that this year. He's pounding the zone. He's got great stuff. The front of the rotation potential is absolutely there. This is a kid who, if he reaches his potential, is a legit number 2, number 1 starter. And then once you get to that level, you do it a couple years, you're an ace. So that potential is there for him. It's just needs more innings and needs to stay healthy.
Yeah, David Loria of Fangraphs called the cutter very Jacob deGrom esque.
I think that was actually Job calling it that himself.
Yeah.
But saying, like, listen, I know I'm not nearly this as good as this guy, but that's the way I want to throw it. Like, I want to throw it like deGrom throws his slider. So, and it is. I mean, it's a low 90s pitch with good horizontal movement. It's pretty nasty.
Yeah, you want to have that kind of confidence to yourself. So number 2 comes in Max Clark. As the more I learn about him, he's done some good work so far in the Florida Complex League with extra base power. A lot of people are wondering why he hasn't been limited on playing time. Again, as Chris pointed out yesterday on the podcast, he could be getting time on another backfield. I'm not really sure why people are kind of concerned about that. And when he's out there, he's hitting and showing why. You can see it's not just a swagger about him. He's backing it up.
Yeah, and so the Tigers used to have 2 Florida Complex League teams, Gulf Coast League teams, right? And that allowed them to have a lot more guys playing every day in official games, if you will. But they have tons of it's a cloverleaf setup back there, right? They have 4 fields going at the same time sometimes, I think. And sometimes guys, it's just like spring training. Some of your players don't travel to Clearwater or Dunedin or wherever they're playing. They stay home and they play a simulated game. And so these guys are getting at bats, they're getting live looks at pitching. They're just not all in the official games. It's hard. They've got a roster of like 60 guys down there now. My personal cheeseball Josue Briseño isn't playing much anymore, even though he was putting up like a 1100 OPS. It's hard to find playing time for all these guys, so I wouldn't worry about it. But anyway, Max Clark, yes, early returns, pretty good. Triple for his first hit. There's a couple doubles. He's gotten an extra base hit in all 3 of his games. He's now they pulled him out of the game today for reasons we don't know, but the game was also delayed by lightning twice, so who knows? But yeah, early, so far so good. Really electric player, and you're hoping that he's gonna continue to grow. And just all the scouting reports, you've seen a lot. It's a true potential 5-tool guy, and so that's why he's number 2 on our list.
So, breaking news real quick. The Tigers have claimed Isan Diaz from the Giants.
Isan Diaz, former second baseman he was on Arizona. He was in Florida. He was in Milwaukee. He was part
Yeah.
of the Christian Yelich trade, I believe, from Milwaukee to Florida. So yeah, wow,
Yeah.
that's
So
interesting.
they designated Zach Logue for assignment,
Oh, Zach
which makes
Logue. We
sense
hardly
for
knew G. They
well, it makes sense for that other thing we were talking about that we cannot say.
mhm.
So yeah, he comes to the Tigers. He's going to be sent to AAA Toledo, and he was batting a robust 053 and 19 plate appearances, 19 at bats for the Giants with an OPS of 195. So another flyer on an infielder.
Yeah, it doesn't. I guess he's a lefty stick, but he's got some time in the big leagues. But yeah, it's not doesn't really move the needle for me. I don't know. Um, but
Yeah, he's a career 179 hitter. So
it feels like, I mean,
it's
he's a triple. Feels like he's like a quad A hitter, right? If
yeah,
you look,
or a
he's
temporary
got,
replacement for Baez because Baez is going to bereavement
you know,
because they had a
so
death in the family. So
2022 he had 23 home runs in AAA, 26 home runs in AAA in 2019. So yeah, but nothing much in the big league. So anyway, yeah, he's not one of our top 30 prospects. I can tell you that much. He was a top 30 prospect at one point, which is a good reminder to all of us that not all of these guys are going to be legit big leaguers. The big leaguers is very hard. Isan Diaz can hit 25 home runs in AAA and not do anything in the majors. Got to remember that.
yeah,
But
remember when you think about Pacific Coast Baseball, PCL, that's
yeah,
what you think of. So and number one for and now number one for the 6 month in a row is I'll do it again. Let me do it better. Number one coming in at number one with a bullet here is Colt Keith, and Colt Keith has developed into quite a player there. Sorry, I was doing this stupid radio cliche voice. Yeah, Colt Keith, a lot of there was kind of the bases loaded stat that all of a sudden some people got hyper fixated on X for. And again, this is the longest season he has played. And I think to me, the reason why Colt Keith's number one, the hit tool stands out. It's loud, and he's been able to hold his own defensively. Uh, you did point out something, Kristen. I think it is a very good point. Ever since that shoulder injury, maybe the arm strength is not there, and so I think there's something to be said about that. But overall, he's been mashing, and the he was a big reason why the Seawolves clinched the playoff spot in the first half of the season.
yeah, and it was another case where this was his first taste of Double A. He played in the fall league, so he got to that level of pitching. But first taste of Double A, struggled for 2 3 weeks, and then noticed something in his swing or his stance, made the adjustment, and then went bonkers. He just was crushing, and to the point where everybody was like, "Why aren't they calling this guy up?" And then they eventually did, and you're kind of seeing why, not why they didn't call him up, but he's still doing just fine in AAA. He's at 273. He's hitting for power. He's walking. He's striking out at about the same rate, but the power level is down a little bit, and the batting average is down a little bit as he's adjusting to this new level of pitching. And specifically to me, it looks like he's just caught in between a little bit like Pacheco, where he's a little bit late on fastballs, bringing over some good breaking balls. I think it's just a matter of time before he adjusts and really takes off again. But if he doesn't, I think you can definitely use the fact he's playing deep into a season for the first time as a reason for that. But yeah, I think it's all in the level of adjustments. He's certainly a guy who is not unprepared. We know that he thinks about hitting. He thinks about working out to get better on defense. He's dedicated to being the best pro baseball player he can be, and so I'm not concerned about him reaching his ceiling. It's just a matter of making those small adjustments. And we heard stories about him being such a good student of baseball that he can diagnose somebody else's swing issues just by looking at him and say, "Hey, try this," and it works. So yeah, he's our number one prospect because we think he's going to hit. He's going to hit for power, and he's going to be at least passable on defense somewhere. Um, I think it's a little iffy at third base, a little iffy at second base, but like as we said, the work ethic is there. He's going to do all he can to at least be a guy who's not a huge drain on the defense, and then he's going to hit a lot. So he's a top 30 prospect in baseball to just about everyone now, and yeah, and so that's why he's our number one. because he's a very good baseball player.
Yeah, welcome to the bandwagon, folks. We've been the Pied Piper about that for a while because, yeah, just based off his demeanor too, and one of the things that we picked up on the interview, we talking to him is like you meet a lot of people at his age that are you can man, I sound like an old man when I say this, but there's cocky and then there's confident, and he's confident, and he in his abilities and the fact that Chris has just said a student in the game, but I think my favorite thing about Cole Keith too is he is such a quick adapter. And this was something that you mentioned on Sunday's podcast where we were talking about how he struggled at first at high A and he adjusted and made that, and he keeps continuously does that. And over the weekend, he could have just had a whole series where he just didn't do anything, but he went out and got the double with the bases loaded. He almost hit it out of the park, and he's a guy. He's not going to quit. He just doesn't quit, and there's something to be said about that too. The work ethic alone. Talking about in spring training, hit one off Manning where it was a hang slider, just demolished it. Being a baseball, if you're really into your craft and working on your craft like that, I don't know. To me, those are the guys that always stand out to me, and those are the memorable ones where you're like, "So what are you doing in your free time? Baseball? Okay."
Yeah. No, and we first learned about him a little bit. I mean, we knew when they drafted him, we were like, "Hey, this is fun." But our buddy James Chipman saw him down in the Florida Complex League back in 2021, and was impressed. And back then, he thought, I like the swing, I like the aggressiveness in the zone. I don't think he's going to hit for power. He thought he was kind of skinnier back then, and it looked more like doubles power. And then Colt Keith decided, you know what, I want to hit for a lot more power because I want to be a third baseman. And so what did he do? He hit for a lot more power. He's one of those kids. He's one of those guys that's going to take his weaknesses as best he can and make them his strengths. I don't think he's going to be a Gold Glove third baseman as much as he says he wants to, but I think he will get to the point where he's going to be just fine there. And like we said, the arm is a little bit. It's not light. It used to be kind of a weapon for him when he was a pitcher throwing the low 90s, and it's just kind of average now. But I think it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, and for the record, James Chipman, who's retired from doing this, he doesn't praise guys easily. This is James Chipman. It takes a lot to impress James W. Chipman. I'm not sure if his middle name's W. I just like it sounds good.
Yeah, I mean he's a legit evaluator, and guys. And so when you've seen a ton of players, you could pick out the flaws pretty quickly and say, nope, that's not going to work. And so in the vast majority of guys don't work out, right? So yeah, it was kind of informative for us to be like, oh, okay, this is a guy we should look out for. And then he got the call up to West Michigan at the end of 2021 and saw it a little bit, and then we saw it a lot early in 2022 until he got hurt. So, and we've seen it all year. He's a good hitter. There's a chance I think we see him in Detroit in September. If not, we'll see him probably early next year.
Yeah, and there's a reason why he's in Toledo. Something that, again, one of the things that is prevalent that has been said by Scott Harris is that if you're in Toledo, you're close to getting to the minor league, to the major leagues rather. That's essentially the next step up, and that's how he's treating Toledo. And based off, I mean, of course, if you minus the pitching aspect of it all, there you go. So go to tiger.mlreports.com. Go to the top 30. So there is a tab for the top 30 list. It's all there with the exception of Long and I'm trying to blank. Yep. And now I'm going to be putting that in there the next day or two. And yeah, check out all the great content. So tigersmlreport.com. And thank you for being a Patreon or YouTube super subscriber. I think I put it down there as a Clubhouse member or something like that. I don't know. I'm still working on the name for the YouTube. So if you're part of the Clubhouse, if you will, we definitely appreciate it.
After Dark.
Yeah.
What was the old Playboy club? Like you have no, it was like he had like a show that was on late at night, and it was
for the
VIPs. But anyway, thanks everybody for being supporting us and liking what we do. Hopefully, and as we say, we're always open to suggestions and any ideas you want us to do or what you'd like to hear more from us. As Roger was saying, they'll basically be kind of a written companion to this podcast, right? If you just want to flip through that, that's notices all the movement and the tool changes that we've done. And then I'm going to do a piece, like another companion piece that's just kind of the guys who just missed the list. They won't be full
Yeah.
scouting reports, but it'll be just kind of little blurbs on each guy.
Yeah, there's one guy that I thought we just missed that should have been on there, at least in my opinion, was Carlos Pena, who has been Carl. I don't know where I had Pena ranked. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but Pena's been doing a really good job at West Michigan this year. He hit all 3 levels last year. He was kind of an or guy, but this year he seems like he's figured things out and has cut back his walks. So we shall see. That would be somebody that we're gonna at some point I'd like to talk to as well. Continue to get some more players and what their thoughts are, what they're doing this year. So just one last thing before we get out of here. So yeah, the Tigers PR department made it official. So Diaz has been cleared off the San Francisco Optimum AAA Toledo. Make room for Diaz. There's a left-handed pitcher, Zach Logue, for assignment. So there's that. And we'll talk to you next time. We'll see you next week if you're listening to the podcast member. And of course, thank you for always supporting the Tiger Minor Report. This work is a lot, and we appreciate you being so patient and always giving us suggestions. So the more suggestions, the better. Have a good night, or excuse me. Wait. Thank you again for enjoying our content.